Okay, good morning, everybody. It's on my clock, it says it's 10:05 Singapore time. So let's go ahead and get this started. Good morning, and it's so exciting to see that we have more than 100 people now. My name is Carmen Pang, and I am one of the founding members of the Singapore Wildcat Action Group, or SWAG, as we like to call ourselves. As you are coming in, you probably would have seen a group of us who have been co-hosting this event. So we have, in addition to our speaker, Dr. Jim Sanderson, we have Vilma Di Rosario, Marcus, and Rachel, and Zihui. We are all the volunteers with SWAG. First of all, I'd like to welcome everybody who is joining us today for our Small Wildcat Conservation. We're very excited as this is the first time that we've ever held something like this online. And we have people signing in from all over the world, so this is great. Before we begin, I actually like to take care of some housekeeping items. We'll be recording today's session, and the video will be uploaded to the SWAG YouTube channel later on. And we'll be putting up the link to our YouTube channel in the chat box, so please click on it and subscribe to our channel. And then also, our speaker, Dr. Sanderson, has agreed to share his presentation with our audience. So we'll be emailing his slide deck to all of you who have signed up via PTX. And as we move to the presentation, you all will be muted throughout. So if there are any questions, please use the chat room function to ask and post your comments. We have volunteers monitoring the chat, and we'll be submitting those questions to Dr. Sanderson after his presentation. And may I remind everyone to keep the comments friendly and civil. And then before I hand over to Vilma, who is also a founding member of SWAG and my co-host today, I would like to tell you a little bit more about who we are. Many of you in Singapore are familiar with the Singapore Wildcat Action Group, and many of you, I see familiar names who have attended our previous Wildcat lectures, but there are a lot of new faces who may not know us so well. So we are SWAG, the Singapore Wildcat Action Group. We were established in just last year in 2019. And our mission is to bring awareness of wildcat conservation to Singapore. And one main way is through these regularly held wildcat lectures, such as the one today. But that said, our ultimate goal is to support MyCat, which stands for the Malaysian Conservation Alliance for Tigers. SWAG was started by a group of MyCat volunteers. All of us have been volunteering for this Malaysian Conservation Alliance for Tigers for quite a few years. And we felt that we should do more because the Malayan tiger is severely endangered. So we set up SWAG, and we organize information sessions to recruit volunteer citizen scientists in Singapore to participate in catwalks in Malaysia. And in just a moment, Vilma will be telling you more about MyCat and catwalks. And also, a very key role we would like to play in as SWAG is to help raise money to support MyCat, who is doing the tiger conservation work in Malaysia. So we do so by organizing fundraising events, such as an annual gala dinner and some periodic tea talks that are only accessible to catwalkers. And we also have merchandise. We raise funds by selling products such as t-shirts and books. And do we have those screens up? Vilma is still looking.
Am I sharing my screen yet?
Yes, you are. Please flip to the next screen now. Press the arrow key or click on the screen.
Oh, okay, all right. Yes.
Yeah, there we go. So if you, Vilma, if you could keep clicking through them. Yep, and that's why I was saying we have merchandises, and we have t-shirts, and we have published a children's book called Little Tiger, and it's about the adventures of this little tiger. And so we're very proud to say that we've managed to raise and donate 25,000 Singapore dollars, which is about 18,000 US dollars to MyCat in 2019. So if you want to learn more about SWAG, about what we do, please go to our Facebook page, our Instagram page, and our Twitter pages. And you will see those links, the links to our pages in the chat box right now. Okay, so now I think we can get going. I'm going to turn the mic over to Vilma, who is going to tell you a little bit more about MyCat and then introduce our speaker, Dr. Jim Sanderson today. So over to you, Vilma.
Hi, everyone. Sorry about that. I hope you can see the screen now. Can you all see this?
Yes,
screen?
Vilma, yes.
Okay, that's great. So I'm going to take 5 minutes to share what SWAG has been doing with the Malaysian Conservation Alliance for Tigers, our Saving Tigers Together program, before Jim comes on. So we really got together because we love the tiger. And the Malayan tiger was our tiger, recorded in the 1830s. But within 100 years, we lost our tiger due to the fact that people considered them a danger. And the last tiger was shot in 1930 in Singapore. Hence, the wild tiger is extinct in Singapore. And since the Malayan tiger is our tiger too, we felt that it would be really great if people living in Singapore could help protect the Malayan tiger. The Malayan tiger is listed as critically endangered in the IUCN Red List, and there are less than 200 tigers, Malayan tigers left in the wild. So we work very closely with MyCat, and since 2015, and MyCat is an alliance of 5 NGOs, the Malayan Nature Society, Traffic Southeast Asia, the Wildlife Conservation Society, the Wildlife Society of Selangor, and WWF Malaysia. They together formed the alliance called MyCat, which is strongly supported by Perhilitan, or the Department of Wildlife and National Parks in Peninsular Malaysia. One of the very big projects of MyCat is Catwalk, or Citizen Action for Tigers Walk. It's an anti-poaching and anti-deforestation surveillance walk, which we have taken part in since 2015. And Citizen Action for Tigers has really empowered us to take action to protect this very special big cat, the Malayan tiger. And since 2015, more than 300 citizen conservationists from Singapore have participated in the Catwalk program. Do find out more from www.mycat.my, and that's going in our chat book. I'm going to tell you a little bit about what we do during a catwalk. We become the eyes and ears of the forest as we walk, and we report in our observations, like looking at possibly big cat poop, looking at the smallest little insects, looking at footprints of tapir. That goes through MyCat to the Wildlife Department. We also set up, check, and maintain trail cameras, which help give MyCat and the authorities an idea of what wildlife is present, including tigers. We also plant native forest tree saplings at the area which we patrol, which is the Sungai Ecological Corridor in Pahang in central Peninsular Malaysia. And conservation impact, we have found that threats seem to have decreased in terms of the number of snares, less snares now. We have seen, we've been able to warn about illegal logging and even mining. And presence of wildlife have been observed to be increasing or have increased. This is through the camera trap photos. Local community awareness and involvement was heightened, and the local community income increased since we stay in the village and we have our meals in the village. And there are personal benefits, you know, like a good sense of satisfaction that we're doing what we can for wildlife. And many of us feel that it's really a privilege to have this feeling, this humbling feeling that we're sharing the forest with wildlife. And the photo on the left shows us from camera trap photo, and 3 days down the line, we have a herd of Asian elephant walking the same trail. So this humbling feeling that the wildlife has been kind enough to allow us to share the forest with them is something of a great benefit. So catwalks have been suspended since March this year due to the pandemic. To date, we do not know when we can next go to the forest. However, MyCat works very closely with the local community and especially with the indigenous people, the Batik tribe people, and they have been trained by MyCat to be community rangers. And once their movement restriction has been relaxed, hopefully next week, the community rangers will be out in the forest doing the surveillance. And we would like to appeal on behalf of MyCat for you to donate whatever you can to the community ranger program. As you know, money has stopped for several months. So there is a global giving platform here to protect the Malayan tiger and restore its habitat. This link will be in the chat, and you can go there and donate whatever you can. Everything is really welcome, and donations will start from June 9th, Malaysia time. So thanks for listening to me and to Carmen. And now we're really very, very excited to present Jim. And our speaker for today, Dr. Jim Sanderson. Jim obtained his PhD in wildlife ecology and conservation from the University of Florida. He's the founder and director of the Small Wildcat Conservation Foundation and a member of the IUCN Cat Specialist Group. He's also on the review board of the Mohammed bin Zayed Species Conservation Fund and fellow of the Wildlife Conservation Network. Jim's mission is to ensure that all small wildcat species of the world survive and thrive, and also that their habitats survive and thrive. Jim is really well known in terms of research in small wildcats, and his photo of the Andean cat, which is a really endearing small wildcat, was on the cover of the National Geographic in February 2000. We are honored and privileged to have Jim to share with us today, and we'd like to hand you over to Jim now. Jim, please, you can share your screen.
Vilma, you have to stop sharing.
Yeah. Okay, let's see if I can do this, huh? Yay.
How does that look?
Looks good, Jim. Thank you.
It looks great.
I'd like to thank my hosts at SWAG for having me. It's a privilege to be here, and I'm delighted to join you all because I feel like we're among the conservationists of the world who really care about what's happening. Let me welcome my colleague Nouri from United Arab Emirates. I'm glad she was able to join us tonight. The answer to one of the first polls was which of the 4 cats were the rarest. By far the rarest cat is the Iberian lynx. There are about 700 in the wild, but this is up from 200 just a few years ago. So we're delighted to have the number of Iberian lynx going up, even though it's still only 700. The tiger is, compared to the Iberian lynx, the tiger is far more common. But of those 4 species, none of them are the rarest in the world. I'll get to the rarest. Hope I get to the rarest. So I have a PhD in mathematics, and I also have a PhD in wildlife ecology. And I'm the program manager for wildcat conservation at Global Wildlife Conservation, which is a group of about 40 people. Our headquarters is in Austin, Texas. And we work all around the world with partners and colleagues. So I have a paying job. I'm not a professor. I'm not an academic. I'm a conservationist of wildcats. Here are some of the wildcats you may know or have heard of: the manul, the margay, and the winya. Here are some of my colleagues that I work with around the world. There's Ashan Kadugla wearing his Mohammed bin Zayed Species Conservation Fund t-shirt in Sri Lanka. And that's one of our wildcat signs that we put up to notify drivers that this is a fishing cat crossing. There's been a lot of selfies of this sign, and it's gotten the attention of the transportation department, who we're now working with, and we want to put a culvert where that sign is. My colleagues in Mongolia work on manul. We have a tourist program I'll talk about. And my colleague Constanza Napolitano followed in my footsteps to work on winyas. So I did my PhD on winyas in Chile, and Constanza has just completed her PhD on winyas in Chile and is now a professor. We had a meeting, our second small wildcat conservation meeting in Colombo, Sri Lanka in December. There's a lot of people working on small cats standing right there. You're probably looking at 3/4 of the people who work on small cats right there. Well, in 1997, when I started my work in Chile, the landscape looked like this. And this is where winyas were living. People didn't have electricity or running water on the island where I worked. It's a large island off the coast of Chile. When you're on it, you don't know you're on an island. So it's Isla Grande de Chiloé. We had, when I went to Chile, we had one picture of one living individual winya. This is it. Here's the picture of the cat. It's somewhere in Chile. Go find it. There were 6 museum specimens that were collected in 1919. And that's all the evidence that I had. 6 museum specimens, so I knew what they looked like. And this picture that gave rise to all sorts of myths. Here's what it really looks like. It weighs about 2.2 kilograms. Hopefully that's less than your house cat. And here's how we change the world for this little cat. We work with people. So I had to study the cat. My PhD is in wildlife ecology and conservation. That means I have to do conservation. And I found that doing conservation first was the best step because I could enlist the local people for help then. So this woman said I could study the cats on her property if I got rid of all of them. That is, I could do a study of these cats, but because they ate all of her chickens, I had to either kill them all or remove them when my study was done. So when I caught the little male, his teeth were falling out. He was so old. He ate all of this, Mrs. Barris's chickens. I caught him, I drugged him, put a little collar on. It's about the size of her wristwatch. And I told my Chilean colleague to go get Mrs. Barris and her daughter and bring them out because I'm going to give them the cat. And my assistant said, she'll kill it. And this is what happened. I handed her the cat and they said, it's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. And this is what happened. 5 minutes minutes before it's taken, she wanted to kill every one of them. She became my strongest advocate and began visiting all the schools in the local area, giving talks about the weenia and how it eats chickens and how it can be stopped. And she put out a warning that if anyone were to harm these weenies, they would have to answer to her. In the space of 5 minutes, she became my strongest advocate. In Nepal, my colleague Sagar Dahal is working on fishing cats. You can see in the background there is a house, and here's a camera trap picture of a fishing cat. What are we doing for fishing cats? Well, it's not always a fishing cat that's the problem. Sometimes it's people's dogs that are taking their fish from their backyard ponds. But nevertheless, the problem is that the cats take the fish, and when they take the fish or the chickens, they end up a dead cat. What do we have to do? Do we have to study the cats to find out what to do? The answer is no. We know what the threat is, and here's what we're doing. Sagar is building better hen houses. So the idea is we build a better hen house at our expense, repair the hen houses at our expense, and in return, there's no need to kill any fishing cats because the cats are not stealing their chickens anymore. So the people have stopped killing jungle cats, they've stopped killing fishing cats, and now the people are actually helping us and they're starting to maintain some of our cameras. We enlisted the help of the local people by working with them and making their lives better. And in return, they don't persecute the cat. We also create conservation networks. So Sagar gives a presentation to these young people, and he creates a conservation network that's all these people have cell phones, and whenever there's a problem with fishing cats or other small cats, they give Sagar a call. So he's creating his eyes and ears across Nepal to deal with these issues. And these people have cell phones, they get around, they hear everything. In Sri Lanka, Ashanta Dugla never raised any cats before, but he rescued these fishing cat kittens and was able to raise them and let them go. Now we have a rescue center that you'll see. And Anya is studying fishing cats that are living, I know it's hard to believe, but they're living in the city of Colombo. The city of Colombo is a Ramsar site. And we have fishing cats roaming around on the waterways within the city and also the wetlands. In fact, they live really close to the parliament because parliament is near a large wetland. So here's Ashan again with our street signs to try to slow down traffic, but also tell people about fishing cats. So we have these signs that people can read. They're written in 3 languages and we put them at bus stops. And in Sri Lanka, when you go to a bus, you're going to be there a long time. So they can read the signs over and over again in multiple languages. And the reason I work only with local people is Ashan is a perfect example of why I only work with local in-country citizens. He speaks 3 languages fluently, Sinhala, Tamil, and English. And so when we go to the rural meetings, people try to trick him by speaking Tamil and then switching into Sinhala. But he can go back and forth without any difficulty. It's something I could never do. Here's a picture from our rescue center. If an elephant or a leopard gets injured in Sri Lanka, they have centers where they can go to treat them. But for smaller cats and smaller animals, it's very difficult. And so we built our own rescue enclosures, multiple enclosures for fishing cats and for otters, for jungle cats and for rusty spotted cats. So here's 3 fishing cats. They were rescued as kittens. They're learning how to fish. I'm in the cage with them. We throw fish into the pond, live fish, they catch them. And then after a year, when the new ones are gonna come in, we open the door and let them come and go as they please into a large wetland area. It's a wetland where I've seen a herd of 300 elephants. So it's the real thing. It's not some backyard. We let these cats go and they'll do fine. Ashan can walk through the forest and sometimes call them and they'll respond vocally to him because he's been with them for so long. Here's a waterfall that we built. We were told that 2 male fishing cats could not get along in one cage, that they would need 2 den boxes instead of 1. We went to all this trouble to build separate den boxes, and at night they both sleep in the same box. And during the day, they enjoy both sitting at the top of the waterfall. These were injured by cars and can't be released into the wild. Ashan has created a network across Sri Lanka. Every year he has youth camps, and this is his eyes and ears. So he was visiting me here in the United States, and he received a call from a colleague that a fishing cat had fallen into a well. What should I do? And Ashan was able to explain, ask him where he was, go talk to this person, get a ladder, go down, don't worry about it, the cat won't hurt you. And we rescued a cat while he was sitting there on his cell phone talking to one of his colleagues in Sri Lanka. And this network is functional all over Sri Lanka. It's an extremely effective way to do island-wide conservation. Murthy Kantamahanti, working in India on fishing cats. When Murthy gives an outreach program, it's attended by a lot of people, and he gets a lot of kids. And that's one of our 2 strategies, and I'll reiterate it over and over. We work with adults to solve their immediate problems, like building better hen houses, and we work with children to permanently change the future. The cats can take care of themselves. We work with people. So we have little kids drawing fishing cats, and Giri working with the fishermen, also setting his cameras. We work with people. Here's Vanessa in Cambodia. It's a very difficult place to work. I know I worked there for 8 years. I had malaria 7 times and dengue once from working in Cambodia. It's a very difficult situation, but there are fishing cats. And again, she's working with people to save the fishing cats and their habitat. If you don't see this kind of a picture, you're not looking at real conservation. Because if we want to change the future, we must work with children. And I think we didn't get into the soup we're in 1 generation, and we're not going to get out in 1 generation. But if we start working with kids now, they'll be able to change the future much faster than we can today, because there'll be more of them. And they will change the future. We work with people to better their lives. Here in Cambodia, one of the issues is plastic waste. So Vanessa's dealing with all this plastic waste, getting communities organized to clean it all up. In Uganda, we have a great program run by my colleague, Badru Mugerwa, for African golden cat. Now, this is probably the least known cat in all of Africa. It's not the rarest cat in all of Africa, but it's the least known. And we're trying to get more going. So our stronghold right now is in Uganda. And the problem was poaching. So here's Badru interviewing a rural guy about why he poaches. Why do you poach? Tell us. How can we help? And this is why it's so important to work with local people, because I could not communicate with this person effectively. Badru can. Badru can read his body language. Sometimes when the person is saying no, I hear no, and Badru's saying, well, his body's telling me he's saying yes. So what does he want? How do we work with this rural village to stop poaching? Well, here's what we did. We asked them what they needed. They needed piglets. If they had piglets, they could raise more pigs. They could sell pigs for meat. They could eat them. They could raise money to send their kids to school, because the kids have to have uniform, pencils, and paper. So we started what Badru calls a piggery program. Now, I've never heard that term before, but it doesn't matter because the piggery program really works. We've given the people piglets. In return, we want a piglet so we can give it to their neighbors and spread the program. And now he's telling us, well, about my neighbor, he could use some piglets too. And we're changing what's happening in this rural village. Our next step in this village, in all these rural villages, is to roll out our mobile dental clinic. So we're readying a mobile van full of medical dental equipment, and we're going to bring it to these rural villages. In return, we're seeing a decline in the poaching. And African golden cat is particularly susceptible to snares. People don't eat them, they're just bycatch that they throw away. But the cats wander around so much, they're vulnerable to snares. And we're seeing, because of our camera traps, we're seeing an increase in the number of cats in the forest and the poaching going down. And it's the women in the village that are making all the difference. The women know what's going on. And they're changing things, and they're helping. They're part of the solution. In Chile, we've been working there since 1997, and we're at the point now where we're just monitoring the situation. And our program is to work with children. We had a program where we were repairing hen houses. That's what I did for the first 3 months of my PhD. I asked people if they had a cat taking their chickens. People said yes. That was the end of my research program for 3 months. All I needed to know was, is the cat taking your chickens, and are you killing it when it takes your chickens? That's all I needed to know. I didn't need to know the ecology of the cat, how many babies it has, what's its home range. I didn't have to know any of those things to reduce the threat. In fact, I could have been a carpenter. I probably would have had an easier time being a carpenter. So I simply worked with people to fix their hen houses, repair their hen houses, and in return, there was no need to kill the cat anymore because it wasn't breaking into their hen houses. Threat reduced. Now I could begin my study with the help of the local people. Now the cat was no longer a threat and there was no need to kill it. Conservation can work. Here's what was happening in Mongolia. We have this little manul. It was living between rocks and I didn't understand why. And we traveled around, looking and looking. And I finally asked, where are the marmots? And it turned out the marmots had been poached out for food, fat, and fur. Gone. Well, the manul have their dens in marmot holes. No marmots, the manul live between rocks. Not a very good place to live, especially when you can have 6 babies. So our program was what? Reintroduce marmots. It turns out that the Mongolian marmot is endangered. We asked the poachers to please bring us live marmots, $20 a piece. They did. The very next day, we had about, I think, 25 marmots, and we paid $20 a piece for them, and they were live. We invited the village to dig holes for the marmots, dig marmot burrows. They came out, helped. You can see the landscape behind me, not a lot of trees. Then we had a little program at school, name that marmot. Once a marmot has a name, it's fully protected. No adult would kill some child's marmot. And it worked. We asked the village what they wanted, and who knew you can only be Mongolian to understand that they wanted volleyballs and volleyball nets. We supplied it to the village. I think they asked for 3 volleyballs and 3 volleyball nets, and we brought 10 of each. They were elated. They started playing volleyball. We won the confidence of the entire village. Now we have manul tours. Steppe Wildlife is offering manul tours. We had 2 tours in 2018, both sold out. Everybody saw manul. In 2019, we had 4 tours. Everyone saw Manul. And this year, we were supposed to have 7 tours with 49 people. I don't know if they've happened. I think they're all postponed. But I'll guarantee you that the first day, you'll see Manul because we know where they live. We know exactly where they live. And these tour programs are paying for our conservation programs. My colleague Tayasa Adhaya in India works with children, but she also works with legislatures legislative bodies to change the laws to make them more favorable for wetlands and for all the species that live there, otters and fishing cats. And no one, I don't think anyone does it better than Tayasa. She's the only person I work with who has received an award and a handshake from the prime minister of a country that has more than 1 billion people, because she's doing such excellent conservation work. Every day, day in and day out, she's working on behalf of the fishing cat and wetlands in India. These are my last few slides. I want to emphasize that conservation is a social science. We work with people to change the future. That's what we do. It's not biology. It's not ecology. It's a mixture of many things. It's a program or a science unto itself. We use genetics. We use photography. We study ecology. We study social sciences to work with people. To change today, we do what Sagar did, build better hen houses. You know how to use a hammer and a saw? Come and join us. To change the future, we work with children. They'll change it. We just have to tell them how. You can visit smallcats.org to learn more about all of our programs around the world. There's a link to most of our programs that you can visit, and you'll see a video of me in Mongolia that's absolutely hilarious because it's the outtakes of a documentary that we were making. Thank you very much for joining us. I'd be happy to answer questions.
Well, thank you, Jim, very much for sharing your very interesting experience in working with local people in doing your conservation work. And we are running slightly behind, so I want to get to as many questions as possible. So we've been getting questions coming in through our chat box, and also we've had questions from people who signed up for this lecture. So I'm going to kick it off. I have a question here about overall wildcat conservation. So Jim, what is the biggest challenge for wildcat conservation in the near future, and how can these challenges be overcome?
Well, of course, one of the challenges for small cats, and really for all small things, is funding. And who would know that the flat-headed cat that you have in peninsular Malaysia, although there are very few in peninsular Malaysia, would be the most endangered cat on the planet. The small flat-headed cat weighs less than probably 3-4 kilograms. And funding for that cat is virtually nothing because it's not very well known. And overall funding for cats, there are 40 species of cats, 40 species of wildcats, 7 are big. They have about $30 million going into big cats annually, whereas the small cats have less than $500,000 for all 33 species. So if you think you're going to make a living working on small cats, I'd give it a second thought. But hopefully this year, during this pandemic, big things are going to happen for small cats, and that funding picture will change permanently going into the future. This I can promise you.
Yeah, Jim, I think the lack of the need for funding is pretty much across the board for all of us who are interested in conservation. So thank you for bringing that very important issue up. And now, Vilma, do you have a question from our Q&A chat box for Jim?
Yes, there are several questions. one question about how do you go about finding suitable local candidates to begin with, to begin the conservation projects with in the first place?
Well, that's a very good question, and I assure you it's done opportunistically. That is, those people arise, are homegrown, and they find us. So sometimes I receive a proposal through the Mohammed bin Zayed Species Conservation Fund from someone I've never met, who shows me all these pictures of African golden cat from Uganda that he got, and he wants to do something about it. And that's Badru Mugerwa. And sometimes it's a proposal like Ashan Tudugla from Sri Lanka. I read the proposal and I see that he wants to measure the intestines of dead fishing cats. I go to Sri Lanka, I have dinner with him and his father, and I reject his proposal as one of the worst I've ever read. But I can read between the lines, and I know he wants to do something great. And I ask him, where are all these dead fishing cats coming from? Let's travel around and you show me. And Ashan is a superstar now. So it's purely opportunistic. We needed someone to work on fishing cats in Pakistan for the longest time. And a young man, I think he's hasn't completed, he hasn't started college yet, hasn't started university, stepped up and said, I have all this information on fishing cats in Pakistan. Who can I share it with? You've come to the right people. And our prayers are answered. Now we have a go-to person in Pakistan, but it's purely opportunistic. The people have to do something first. So I'd like to say, if you can imagine, you receive two proposals. One is from a person who's working with people, fixing their hen houses, and says, I could do more for these cats if I had some money. And then there's another person, maybe a university student from the US, who says, I want to go to this place and study these cats. Who's going to get the funding? It's just self-evident. The person with the hammer.
Wow, okay.
Thank you.
So, yeah, thank you. Another question I have here is a specific one. It came through the PTIX sign up app. So in order to contribute to the conservation efforts of the Andean cat, which is the most urgent topic to research?
The AGA, Andean Cat Alliance, was created with WCN about 15 years ago. So AGA, Andean Cat Alliance, is a WCN Wildlife Conservation Network partner. Their whole program is about reducing threats to Andean cat by working with rural villages. So it's all about outreach. It's all about visiting these villages and convincing people that the cat really isn't good luck, and that you shouldn't kill it. And it's all about threat reduction. If you can make these hats, we can sell them in zoos in the US. We already have enough research about Andean cat. We know about its diet. We know how many young they have a year. We know their home ranges. Our program, the AGA program, is focused on threat reduction. What's the threat and how are you stopping it? That's what we do. That's what AGA does. They work with people to reduce the threat. There isn't any research priority that I know of. And any money that we get, any funding that comes in, is spent on reducing threats. In Bolivia, Chile, Argentina, and Peru, same program.
Yeah, so we have a question and a few questions related to that. I agree that working with people on prevention of poultry damage is very important, but how do you assess the success on populations with no ecological or demographic information of the population and the impact on the prey community? So asking about research, if you reduce the threat, but you don't know anything about the population, how do you reconcile that?
Well, it's really quite easy to reconcile. When you consider that less than $1 million is going to 33 species of small cats around the world, and it's at the same time, it's costing the US government and some conservation organization, I think it's the Humane Society, more than $1.5 million to count the number of feral cats in Washington, D.C., to estimate their number. How are we going to do the same for wildcats? It's impossible. We can't even do it in our nation's capital. Figure out the number of feral cats. These are not wildcats. These are just feral cats. And it costs $1.5 million. We simply don't have the money. So given a fixed amount of money, are we going to spend it counting cats in the wild whose number changes, or are we going to spend it on threat reduction? We have to spend it on threat reduction. And when the killing goes down, we assume that's a good thing for the cats.
Well, we have here another, thank you. We have another question about funding here. As we've seen in the poll, the funding for small cat is very small. So the question is there an explanation for why funds are unbalanced between small and big wildcat conservation? And then what must be done to overcome this imbalance?
Well, it seems to be true across all taxa. So there are, probably 200 species of turtles and tortoises around the world, but where does the bulk of the funding go? It goes to 7 sea turtles. With primate conservation, where does all the, there's 100 species of lemurs. There must be 250 species of primates around the world. Where does most of the funding go? It goes to the great apes, gorillas, chimpanzees, bonobos, and orangutan. Where does marine mammal funding go? It goes to whales. It always goes to the big charismatic things. Where does bird funding mostly go? To eagles, the large birds, the large predatory birds, the birds that capture our imagination. So we say charismatic megafauna. That's always been true. I don't think there's anything we can do about it. We can raise awareness, but from our social science studies, we know that raising awareness does not necessarily change behavior. People say, wow, I didn't know that. I'm way more aware. I'm not going to change my behavior. I'm still going to give to whatever, but at least I'm aware of it now. Thank you for increasing my awareness. But I didn't change their behavior. That's the problem. We can give all these facts, but we can't change behavior. Behavior change happens when you touch the heart. A good example is smoking. If you stop smoking, you'll get healthier. Your children won't have secondhand smoke. It has to be made personal. And it's hard to make these small cats personal. In the United States, where we only have bobcats and lynx, I think we have less than 100 ocelots. People are much more fascinated with pumas that are far more widespread. And it's a beautiful cat. There's nothing wrong with pumas, but it's very hard to change people's attitudes.
Yes. Okay. Another question.
They don't change.
Yeah, so actually, I think we have time for one more question. And Vilma, you have a question for Jim?
Yeah. Has there been any research done on possible zoonosis between domestic animals and wildcats?
Oh yes, a lot. In Chile, we studied domestic cats and their impact on weenias. So the question was, because Constanza is a molecular biologist, she was sampling these weenias for diseases and wanted to know how these cats would fare in a population of domestic cats. So she ended up tagging domestic cats that went deep into the forest at night, but of course woke up in the morning on the people's porch, giving them the appearance that they weren't very far out into the forest. Constanza found that weenias had been exposed to many different domestic feline diseases, but remarkably, she didn't find any weenias that had clinical symptoms of the disease. And this might be because the Leopardus genus, the genus Leopardus, which is most small cats in South America, have one less pair of chromosomes than all other cats. All cats have 19 pairs of chromosomes, but the Leopardus genus, one of the 8 lineages of cats, has only 18 pairs. And it could be this chromosome arrangement that prevents not only interbreeding with domestic cats, but also the appearance, the clinical sign of a disease that they've contacted from domestic cats. And around the world, this is a problem. You know, Scottish wildcats interbreeding with domestic cats virtually made the Scottish wildcat extinct just from crossbreeding. Their genes are mixed in with domestic cats, but there is transmission of diseases from wildcats from domestic cats to wildcats. That's an issue. It's an issue in Sri Lanka where our fishing cats are dying of diseases they get from dogs, canine distemper or some feline disease. And in Sri Lanka, we have no drugs to treat it. I have to bring it from the US or send it. You can't buy it in Sri Lanka. This is a problem for our rescue center is we need to treat those fishing cats before they're released or they will die. These diseases are transmitted through the air.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah, thank you. I think this is a very timely topic, obviously, as we go through, you know, the COVID pandemic as we speak. But with that, unfortunately, we're near our scheduled time for today. But before we sign off, I'd like to thank Dr. Sanderson for taking time to share with us today his knowledge and insight on all small cat, wildcat conservation. But I also want to thank my on-screen co-hosts, Vilma and Marcus. In case you don't know, Marcus is actually, he's the curator of mammal and birds of the Lee Kong Chian Natural History Museum at the NUS at National University of Singapore. And he studied leopard cats extensively. And if you're familiar with our Singapore Wildcat Action Group Facebook page, the banner photo of the leopard cat is actually taken by Marcus. So if anyone who is interested in learning more about leopard cats, please stay tuned to us because we're actually working together. We're hoping to, we're planning a future Wildcat lecture on leopard cat, and Marcus has agreed to be our guest speaker. So stay tuned. And also I must thank our SWAG volunteers, Rachel and Zihui, who provided a lot of back-end support to make today's event run smoothly. So thank you, everyone. But before we sign off, we'd like to do a Wi-Fi.